She was trapped in the elevator, and the millionaire who saved her couldn't hide his desire anymore. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't stay this late, but she always did. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the empty 42nd floor of Madden Construction, casting harsh shadows across the maze of cubicles and glass offices. Natalie Dormer adjusted her reading glasses and rubbed her tired eyes, the glow from her computer screen reflecting off her rich mahogany skin. At 27, she had learned that success came to those who stayed longer, worked harder, and asked for less. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, fine-tuning the final details of the Riverside apartment complex proposal. The building would house 300 families, a project that could define her career if she got it right. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat twist, a few rebellious curls framing her heart-shaped face. She wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, professional yet understated, the uniform of someone who had learned to blend in while standing out through sheer excellence. "Just 5 more minutes," she whispered to herself, the same lie she'd been telling for the past hour. The office around her told the story of American corporate ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering Manhattan skyline, while inside, modern furniture mixed with classic architectural elements spoke of both innovation and tradition. This was the domain of Madden Construction, one of New York's most prestigious development firms. Natalie saved her work and stretched her neck, wincing slightly. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, "Baby girl, you work so hard you forget to live." But living was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when she was one of only 3 black architects in a company of over 200 employees, and certainly not when she was still paying off student loans that seemed to multiply rather than shrink. She glanced at her watch, 8:47 p.m. The cleaning crew had already been through, leaving behind the faint scent of lemon and the kind of silence that only empty office buildings possessed. Her stomach growled, reminding her that the granola bar she'd eaten at lunch was a distant memory. Standing up, Natalie gathered her things: laptop bag, the thermos that had held her 3rd cup of coffee, and the small succulent plant her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez had given her last month. "For your desk," the elderly woman had said with a knowing smile. "Plants need attention to grow, just like people." The elevator banks were located in the center of the floor, surrounded by a circle of executive offices. As she approached, Natalie couldn't help but notice that the lights were still on in the corner office, the one with Jason Madden, CEO, etched in elegant silver letters on the door. Jason Madden. Even his name carried weight in the construction world. At 38, he had transformed his father's modest firm into a billion-dollar empire. Natalie had seen him exactly 4 times in her 2 years at the company, twice during all-hands meetings, once in the lobby, and once when he'd walked past her cubicle without so much as a glance. He was exactly what central casting would order for a powerful CEO, 6'3" with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored suits perfectly. His dark brown hair was always impeccably styled, and his green eyes seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. There was something almost dangerous about his stillness, the way he could command a room simply by entering it. The elevator chimed softly as Natalie pressed the down button. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her comfortable flats a concession to the long hours she spent standing at drafting tables. The digital display showed the elevator climbing. 35, 36, 37. "Come on," she murmured, eager to get home to her 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, where leftover Chinese takeout and a Netflix series were waiting for her. The doors slid open with a gentle whisper, revealing the empty elevator car with its polished steel walls and soft lighting. Natalie stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby, already mentally planning her evening routine: a hot shower, comfortable pajamas, and maybe a phone call to her sister in Atlanta. Just as the doors began to close, a hand appeared between them, causing them to retreat with a soft, pneumatic hiss. Jason Madden stepped into the elevator, Natalie's breath caught in her throat. Up close, he was even more imposing and more beautiful than she had realized. His charcoal suit was clearly bespoke, fitting his athletic frame like it had been painted on. A hint of expensive cologne, mixed with something distinctly masculine, reached her, and she found herself taking a small step back. "Good evening," he said, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to fill the small space. His eyes met hers briefly, a flash of green that was both intense and surprisingly warm, before he turned to press the lobby button. only to find it already illuminated. "Evening, Mr. Madden," Natalie replied, proud that her voice came out steady despite the way her heart was suddenly racing. She clutched her laptop bag a little tighter, hyper-aware of every detail, the way his cufflinks caught the light, the subtle shadow of 5 o'clock stubble on his strong jaw, the fact that he smelled like success and something dangerously appealing. The elevator began its descent, and silence settled between them like a living thing. Natalie stared at the digital floor display, watching the numbers count down. 40, 39, 38. She could feel him beside her, a presence that seemed to take up more space than physics should allow. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed his hands, long fingers, no wedding ring, a vintage watch that probably cost more than her annual salary. 35, 34, 33. "Working late again, miss?" His voice broke the silence, and Natalie realized with a start that he was looking at her. Dormer. Natalie Dormer. And yes, sir, the Morrison project needed some final adjustments. She turned slightly to face him, noting the way his eyes seemed to really see her, not just glance through her as so many executives did. "Ah, the Riverside Development. Ambitious project." He shifted slightly, and she caught another hint of that cologne. "Good work on the sustainable design elements. Very innovative." Natalie blinked in surprise. He knew her work. "Thank you, sir. The elevator lurched suddenly, a mechanical grinding sound echoing through the shaft. The lights flickered once, twice, then settled into the dim emergency lighting. The digital display went dark. They had stopped somewhere between the 23rd and 24th floors. In the sudden amber glow of the emergency lights, Jason Madden's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something almost human underneath. And in that moment, Natalie realized that some prisons were about to become the most dangerous kind of freedom. Control was something Jason Madden had never lost, until now. The emergency lighting cast everything in an amber hue, transforming the polished elevator into something that felt almost intimate. Jason pressed the alarm button once, twice, then held it down for a full 10 seconds. Nothing. He pulled out his phone. No signal. "Well," he said, his voice carrying that controlled calm that had gotten him through hostile takeovers and board meetings from hell. "This is unexpected." Natalie watched him with fascination. Even trapped in a metal box between floors, Jason Madden looked like he belonged on the cover of Fortune magazine. But she caught something else now, a slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed once against his thigh before he stilled them. He wasn't as unaffected as he wanted to appear. "How often does this happen?" she asked, setting down her laptop bag and leaning against the wall. If they were going to be here for a while, she might as well get comfortable. "In this building, never." Jason loosened his tie slightly, the first crack in his perfect armor. "The elevator system was installed last year. German engineering. It's supposed to be foolproof." "Well, they didn't account for Friday night and 2 very tired people, apparently." Natalie surprised herself with the easy tone in her voice. Something about the surreal situation was making her feel bolder than usual. Jason's lips quirked upward. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're taking this remarkably well, Miss Dormer." "Natalie, please. And honestly, after the week I've had, being trapped in an elevator with my boss feels almost restful." She laughed softly, and Jason found himself really looking at her for the first time. Her laugh was warm and genuine, nothing like the calculated responses he was used to hearing. In the amber light, her skin had a golden glow, and when she smiled, tiny lines appeared at the corners of her dark brown eyes, evidence of someone who laughed often, despite whatever challenges she faced. "Bad week?" he asked, genuinely curious. Natalie hesitated. Was she really about to complain to the CEO about work? But something in his expression, a softness she'd never seen in the boardroom, encouraged her to continue. "Mrs. Patterson in 4B called me 12 times about the color of the lobby tiles. Apparently warm beige isn't warm enough, and cream is too cold. Then the City Planning Committee decided they needed to review our environmental impact study again, which means I'll be spending my weekend rewriting 30 pages of technical specifications." She shook her head. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about the day-to-day chaos." "Actually, I do." Jason loosened his tie further and undid the top button of his shirt. "I spend most of my time in meetings about meetings. It's been a while since I heard about the real work." There was something almost vulnerable in his admission, and Natalie felt her perception of him shifting. She'd always imagined Jason Madden as someone who lived in boardrooms and private jets, removed from the messy details of actual construction. "What about you?" she asked. Bad week for someone who owns the building? Jason was quiet for a moment, considering how much to reveal. The Tokyo deal fell through. 3 months of negotiations, and they decided to go with a local firm instead. I found out this morning. I'm sorry. That must have been disappointing. Disappointing. Jason laughed, but there was no humor in it. That deal was worth $200 million. My board is, let's say they're questioning my judgment. Natalie studied his profile as he stared at the elevator doors. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call pursuing international expansion. The Morrison Project's sustainability features. That's the kind of innovation that'll matter in 5 years, when every other firm is scrambling to catch up. Jason turned to look at her, genuinely surprised. You've been following the company strategy. I care about where I work. Natalie felt heat rise in her cheeks. Maybe too much, according to my sister. She thinks I should have more of a life outside the office. And do you have a life outside the office? The question was more personal than she'd expected, and for a moment, Natalie wondered if she was dreaming this entire conversation. Jason Madden was asking about her life, like he actually cared about the answer. Not much of one, she admitted. I have a plant that I talk to sometimes. My neighbor thinks I'm eccentric because I know all the doormen's names and ask about their families. Oh, and I make excellent grilled cheese sandwiches, though I usually eat them alone while watching design shows. That sounds... Jason paused, searching for the right word. Peaceful. Lonely is the word you're looking for, Natalie said with a self-deprecating smile. But I've gotten used to it. What about you? I imagine your social calendar is pretty full. Jason thought about his penthouse apartment, 3,000 square feet of carefully curated emptiness, about the charity galas where he smiled for photographers and wrote checks, but never connected with anyone, about the women who saw dollar signs instead of the man underneath the expensive suits. Loneliness looks different when you're surrounded by people who want something from you, he said quietly. The honesty in his voice made Natalie's chest tighten. She'd never imagined that Jason Madden might understand the particular ache of being alone in a crowded room. The irony is, she said softly, I design homes for other people, beautiful spaces where families will make memories, where couples will fight and make up, where children will take their first steps. But I go home to a studio apartment with mismatched furniture and take-out containers. Why architecture? Jason asked, settling against the wall across from her. The formal distance between them was shrinking, both physically and emotionally. My grandmother. Natalie's voice took on a tender quality. She cleaned office buildings downtown for 40 years. Every night, she'd come home and tell me stories about the beautiful spaces she saw, marble lobbies, crystal chandeliers, offices with views that went on forever. She'd say, "Baby girl, someday you're going to build something so beautiful that people will stop and stare." Did she live to see you become an architect? Natalie shook her head. She passed during my 3rd year of college. But sometimes when I'm working on a project, I imagine her walking through the finished building, proud that her granddaughter helped create something lasting. Jason felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. She sounds like she was an extraordinary woman. She was. She taught me that dignity isn't about what you do for work, but how you do it. That kindness costs nothing but pays dividends. Natalie stopped, realizing she was rambling. Sorry, I don't usually talk this much about personal things. Don't apologize. Jason's voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. I like hearing about the person behind the excellent work. Their eyes met in the amber light, and for a moment, the elevator felt smaller and larger all at once. Natalie was acutely aware of everything, the way Jason's shirt had pulled slightly across his chest when he'd loosened his tie, the fact that his perfectly styled hair was now slightly mussed, the intensity in his green eyes that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. The elevator shuddered slightly, and they both looked up at the ceiling. Think they know we're here? Natalie asked. Jason checked his watch. Building security does a final sweep at 10. If we're still here, then... He didn't finish the sentence, but they both realized they might be spending a very long night learning things about each other that daylight would make them want to forget. Some conversations change everything, even when they start with nothing. An hour had passed, maybe 2. Time felt suspended in the amber-lit space between floors. Jason had removed his suit jacket entirely, draping it carefully over the handrail, and rolled up his sleeves to reveal forearms that were surprisingly muscular for a man who spent his days behind a desk. Natalie had kicked off her flats and sat cross-legged on the floor, her blazer folded neatly beside her. The professional distance that usually existed between them had evaporated somewhere between his admission about loneliness and her story about grilled cheese dinners. "Okay, I have to ask," Natalie said, unwrapping a granola bar she'd found in her purse and breaking it in half. She offered the larger piece to Jason. "Do you actually eat the catered lunches at those board meetings? Or do you just push food around your plate and look intimidating?" Jason accepted the granola bar with a smile that was becoming easier, more natural. "You've been watching me at board meetings? I've been to exactly 2 board meetings in my life, and both times you looked like you'd rather be getting root canal surgery." Natalie bit into her half of the granola bar. "Also, you have this thing you do with your pen. You click it exactly 3 times whenever someone says something particularly stupid." "I do not." But Jason's protest was half-hearted, and there was amusement in his eyes. "You absolutely do. Anderson from finance? Every time he starts talking about synergistic paradigm shifts, click, click, click." Jason laughed, a real laugh that started deep in his chest and filled the small space around them. "Anderson uses those exact words at least once per meeting. I thought no one else noticed." "Oh, we all notice. There's actually a betting pool about how many times you'll click your pen during quarterly reviews." "And you participate in office betting pools about my pen-clicking habits?" Natalie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I may have contributed $1 or 2 to the cause. What's your usual bet?" 7 clicks minimum. You have very little patience for corporate buzzwords." Jason shook his head, still smiling. "I can't believe my staff is gambling on my nervous habits." "It's not nervous," Natalie said thoughtfully. "It's more like controlled frustration. Like you're counting to 10 in your head, but the pen clicking is counting to 3. The observation was so accurate it made Jason pause. "You pay very close attention to people. It's part of being an architect. You have to understand how people move through spaces, what makes them comfortable or uncomfortable. Body language tells you more than words sometimes." "What does my body language tell you right now?" The question hung between them, loaded with something that felt dangerous and thrilling. Natalie studied him, the way he'd loosened his tie completely, letting it hang undone around his neck, how he'd braced one hand against the wall behind him, the way he was looking at her like she was a puzzle he genuinely wanted to solve. "Right now," she said softly, "you look relaxed. More relaxed than I've ever seen you. Like maybe you're not thinking about quarterly projections or hostile takeovers." "I'm not." His voice was quieter now, more intimate. "I'm thinking about how you knew exactly what kind of pen I use without ever having been close enough to see it clearly." Natalie's breath caught. "It's a Mont Blanc, black with silver accents. You use it to sign contracts in the conference room. You've been watching me sign contracts?" "I've been watching you, period." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and Natalie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I mean, not watching, just noticing. The way you read documents. You actually read every page, even when everyone else is just flipping to the signature lines. The way you remember people's names, even the custodial staff. How you always thank whoever brings coffee to meetings." Jason was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. "Most people see what they expect to see when they look at me." "What do they expect to see?" "A ruthless businessman. Someone who inherited everything and never had to work for anything. A man who cares more about profit margins than people." "And what should they see?" Jason met her eyes. "Someone who worked construction summers during college because my father believed in earning respect before demanding it. Someone who knows the name of every person who works in this building because my mother taught me that dignity starts with acknowledgement. Someone who—" He paused, seeming to wrestle with whether to continue. "Someone who what?" "Someone who hasn't felt this comfortable talking to another person in years." The admission settled between them like a shared secret. Natalie felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with being trapped and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. "Your parents sound like good people," she said gently. "They were. Dad died of a heart attack when I was 28. Stress, the doctors said. Too many years of building the business without taking care of himself. Mum lasted 3 more years before cancer took her." Jason's voice was matter-of-fact, but Natalie caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "I promised them both I'd build something that mattered, not just something that made money. Is that why you pushed for the sustainable design elements in the Morrison project?" "Partly, but also because I read your original proposal, the one you submitted before the committee watered it down. Your vision was extraordinary. Green rooftops, solar integration, community spaces that would actually bring people together instead of just housing them. It was the kind of project my parents would have been proud of." Natalie stared at him. You read my original proposal? I read all the proposals that crossed my desk, but yours, he shook his head, yours made me remember why I got into this business in the first place. I thought corporate killed that proposal because it was too expensive. Corporate killed it because they don't understand that some things are worth the investment. But I saved it. I've been looking for the right project to implement those ideas. You have? Jason nodded. There's a development coming up in Brooklyn, low-income housing, but the city wants something special. Something that proves affordable doesn't have to mean uninspired. He paused. I was planning to ask you to lead the design team. Natalie felt the world tilt slightly. You were going to ask me to lead a project. Monday morning, actually. I had it scheduled for first thing. But I'm just a junior architect. I've never led anything bigger than a single building renovation. You're a junior architect with senior-level vision and the kind of passion this company needs. Jason's voice was firm, convinced. The Morrison project is good work, Natalie, but it's safe work. I want to see what you can do when you're not playing it safe. The elevator suddenly jolted, and they both looked up hopefully, but after a moment of mechanical groaning, everything went quiet again. Well, Natalie said, trying to lighten the mood even as her mind reeled from Jason's revelation, at least we're having the most productive career conversation I've ever had. Is that what this is? Jason asked, and something in his tone made Natalie look at him more carefully. He was watching her with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how intimate this space had become, how the amber lighting made everything feel dreamlike and suspended from reality. What else would it be? She asked, but her voice came out breathier than intended. Jason was quiet for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't know yet, but as the night deepened around them, and the city lights twinkled through the small gap between elevator doors, they both began to suspect that Monday morning, and everything they thought they knew about professional boundaries, was going to feel very far away. Truth has a way of surfacing when there's nowhere left to hide. The temperature in the elevator had dropped noticeably as the night wore on. Natalie rubbed her arms absently, the thin fabric of her blouse offering little warmth against the building's aggressive air conditioning system that apparently didn't account for people being trapped between floors for hours. Jason noticed immediately. Without a word, he reached for his suit jacket and moved closer to her. Here, he said, draping the jacket around her shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body heat and carried that intoxicating scent of expensive cologne mixed with something distinctly him. Thank you, Natalie murmured, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. It was far too large for her, the shoulders hanging loose, but it felt like being wrapped in a protective embrace. Jason settled beside her against the wall, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Close enough that when he shifted slightly, his shoulder brushed against hers. Better? He asked. Much. But Natalie wasn't sure if she was talking about the warmth from his jacket or the comfort of having him near. Your jacket probably costs more than I make in a month. It's just fabric, Natalie. The way he said her name, soft, almost intimate, made her stomach flutter. Easy to say when you're not the one worried about dry cleaning bills. Jason laughed quietly. I'll take care of the dry cleaning. You don't have to. I want to. His voice was firm but gentle. Besides, it looks better on you than it does on me. Natalie felt heat rise in her cheeks and was grateful for the dim lighting. I doubt that. I'm serious. You have this way of making everything around you seem more alive, more real. The compliment caught her off guard, and she turned to study his profile. In the amber light, with his hair slightly mussed and his tie hanging loose, Jason looked younger, more approachable, more human than the intimidating figure who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why construction? You could have done anything with your life. Gone to law school, become a doctor, traveled the world. Why choose to build things? Jason was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. When I was 8, there was a fire in our neighborhood. Old tenement building, families with nowhere to go. My parents housed 3 families in our home for 2 months while they found new places to live. He paused, lost in the memory. I remember watching my father work with the city, with contractors, with architects, trying to find these families safe, affordable housing. And I remember him saying that everyone deserves a home that doesn't just shelter them from the weather, but shelters their dreams too. Natalie felt her chest tighten. That's beautiful. He used to take me to job sites on weekends. Not the fancy developments, but the housing projects, the community centers, the schools. He'd show me how buildings could change lives, How the right design could make a poor kid feel like they deserved beautiful things, or how natural light in a classroom could help children learn better. And now you build those kinds of projects? Jason's laugh was slightly bitter. Now I build luxury condos for people who have more money than they know what to do with. Not exactly my father's vision. But you want to change that. The Brooklyn project you mentioned, it's a start. But the board fights me on every project that doesn't guarantee maximum profit. They think I'm being sentimental. Are you? Jason turned to look at her. Maybe. Does that make me weak in your eyes? It makes you human. Natalie shifted slightly, and their knees touched. Neither of them moved away. Do you know what I think about when I'm designing residential projects? Tell me. I think about a little girl coming home from school, walking into a building that makes her feel like she matters. I think about an elderly man who lost his wife, sitting by a window that lets in just the right amount of afternoon light to read his newspaper. I think about young couples saving every penny for their first apartment, and how the layout I design might be where they have their first fight, their first makeup, maybe where they'll bring their first baby home. Jason listened intently, captivated by the passion in her voice. Buildings aren't just structures, Natalie continued. They're the backdrop for people's entire lives. Every decision we make, the height of a countertop, the width of a hallway, the placement of a window, affects how people live, how they feel about themselves, how they interact with their families. You sound like my father, Jason said softly. He sounds like he was a wise man. He would have liked you. Jason's voice was barely above a whisper. He would have said you understand what matters. The compliment hung between them, weighted with meaning that had nothing to do with architecture, and everything to do with the connection that was building in this small, suspended space. Jason? Natalie's voice was tentative. Yeah? What happens when we get out of here? The question they'd both been avoiding finally surfaced. Jason was quiet for a long moment, and Natalie could feel the tension in his body beside her. I don't know, he admitted. Monday morning, you'll be the architect I'm promoting to lead the Brooklyn project. I'll be your boss. There will be meetings and deadlines and professional boundaries. And tonight? Jason turned to face her fully, his green eyes searching her face in the amber light. Tonight feels like something else entirely. Natalie's breath caught. It does. I know I shouldn't say this, Jason said, his voice low and rough. I know it complicates everything, but I need you to know that what's happening here, what I'm feeling, it has nothing to do with being your boss, and everything to do with being a man who spent the last 4 hours discovering that the most fascinating woman he's ever met has been working 10 feet from his office for 2 years. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. Jason, I know it's complicated. I know there are rules and policies, and a dozen reasons why this is a terrible idea. It is a terrible idea, Natalie whispered, but she didn't move away from him. The worst, Jason agreed, his hand coming up to brush a loose curl away from her face. So why does it feel like the first right thing I've done in years? The elevator shuddered again, more violently this time, and the emergency lights flickered. For a moment, they were plunged into complete darkness. In the blackness, Natalie felt Jason's hand find hers, his fingers intertwining with hers, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Are you okay? He asked. I'm okay, she whispered back, and realized she meant it. Despite being trapped, despite the uncertainty, despite the impossible situation they found themselves in, she felt safer in this moment than she had in months. The lights flickered back on, but neither of them let go. And somewhere in the distance, they could hear the faint sound of voices, the security team finally beginning their search. Freedom was only 20 floors away, but neither of them wanted to be rescued. The voices were getting closer, muffled shouts echoing through the elevator shaft, the sound of heavy footsteps on the stairwells. Jason and Natalie sat in the amber-lit space, still holding hands, both acutely aware that their time in this suspended reality was coming to an end. They'll find us soon, Jason said quietly, but he made no move to let go of her hand. Probably. Natalie's thumb traced across his knuckles without her conscious permission. Are you ready for that? The question had layers. Ready to return to the real world? Ready to face Monday morning? Ready to pretend that the last several hours hadn't fundamentally changed something between them? No, Jason admitted. Are you? Before Natalie could answer, the elevator lurched violently, then began moving upward with a mechanical grinding sound. Emergency lights flickered, and the normal lighting suddenly blazed to life, harsh and unforgiving, after hours of intimate amber glow. They blinked against the brightness, and suddenly the spell was broken. Jason was once again the impeccably dressed CEO, even with his tie undone and sleeves rolled up. Natalie was an employee wearing her boss's jacket, sitting on the floor of an elevator. They dropped each other's hands and scrambled to their feet, the easy intimacy of moments before replaced by awkward awareness of boundaries and propriety. 24th floor, the elevator's mechanical voice announced with cheerful indifference. The doors slid open to reveal 3 security guards, 2 maintenance workers, and a very concerned-looking building manager. "Mr. Madden, thank goodness!" The building manager, Rodriguez, rushed forward. "We've been looking for you for hours. The system showed the elevator stuck between floors, but we couldn't get a precise location until now." "We're fine, Rodriguez," Jason said, his voice already shifting back into executive mode. He reached for his suit jacket, and Natalie quickly shrugged out of it, their fingers brushing as she handed it back to him. "Miss Dormer, are you all right?" Rodriguez noticed her for the first time. "We didn't realize anyone else was in the elevator." "I'm perfectly fine," Natalie said, slipping her feet back into her flats and smoothing down her blouse. "Just a long night." One of the security guards stepped forward. "We should call paramedics just to be safe. Being trapped for that long can cause dehydration, anxiety." "That won't be necessary," Jason interrupted, shrugging back into his jacket. "We're both fine." But as he spoke, his eyes met Natalie's, and she saw something there that contradicted his words. He didn't look fine. He looked like a man who had just lost something precious and wasn't sure how to get it back. "What time is it?" Natalie asked, gathering her laptop bag and thermos. "Just past midnight," Rodriguez replied. "Saturday morning, technically." Saturday. Natalie felt a strange disconnect. When they'd entered the elevator, it had been Friday evening, the end of another work week. Now it was the weekend and everything felt different. "I'll have a car take you home," Jason said, his tone professional but not unkind. "That's not necessary, Mr. Madden. I can take the subway." "At midnight?" "Absolutely not." Jason's voice brooked no argument, and for a moment the man who had shared granola bars and childhood stories flickered behind the CEO mask. "Rodriguez, please arrange for a car to take Miss Dormer home safely." "Right away, sir." As the group moved toward the lobby, Natalie found herself walking beside Jason but feeling miles away from him. The easy conversation, the shared laughter, the moment when he'd brushed her hair from her face, it all felt like a dream now, something that had happened to other people. In the marble lobby with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers, the contrast was stark. This was Jason's world, polished, expensive, intimidating. Natalie caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls and winced. Her hair was disheveled, her blouse wrinkled, her face showing every hour of their ordeal. "Miss Dormer," Rodriguez approached with a set of keys. "The car is waiting outside. Driver will take you wherever you need to go." "Thank you." Natalie turned to Jason, unsure of the protocol for this situation. Did she thank him? Pretend nothing had happened? "Mr. Madden, have a good weekend, Natalie," Jason said quietly. But the way he said her name, soft, almost reluctant, reminded her of how it had sounded in the elevator. "You too." She started toward the door, then stopped. "Jason?" He turned, and for a moment the lobby full of people disappeared. "Monday morning," she said. "The Brooklyn project meeting." "What time?" Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, that she was acknowledging that their professional relationship would continue. 9 o'clock, conference room A. "I'll be there." "I know you will." Natalie walked toward the exit, aware that Jason was watching her go. At the revolving door, she turned back one last time. He was standing in the center of the lobby, hands in his pockets, looking suddenly alone despite being surrounded by his staff. Their eyes met across the distance, and Natalie felt that familiar flutter in her chest. Then she pushed through the door and stepped into the cool night air. The car was a sleek black sedan, the kind of vehicle that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. The driver, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform, held the door open for her. "Where to, miss?" Natalie gave him her address in Brooklyn and settled into the leather seats. As the car pulled away from the curb, she caught a glimpse of Jason through the lobby windows. He was still standing in the same spot, watching the street. The drive to Brooklyn took 45 minutes in the light traffic. Natalie stared out the window at the city lights, replaying every moment of their time in the elevator. Had she imagined the connection between them? The way he'd looked at her when he said she made everything seem more alive. The careful way he'd draped his jacket around her shoulders. By the time the car pulled up to her modest apartment building, Natalie had almost convinced herself that the entire evening had been a stress-induced hallucination. "Here you are, miss," the driver said, getting out to open her door. "Thank you." Natalie climbed out, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you drive for Mr. Madden often?" The driver smiled. 5 years now. He's a good man, miss. Fair. Doesn't ask for anything unreasonable. Has he ever? I mean, does he often arrange cars for employees?" The driver studied her for a moment. "In 5 years, miss, I've never been asked to drive anyone home except Mr. Madden himself. You must have made quite an impression." Natalie felt her cheeks warm. "Good night." "Good night, miss." As she climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, Natalie's mind raced. If Jason didn't usually arrange transportation for employees, what did that mean? Was it simply concern for her safety, or something more? Her apartment felt smaller than usual when she unlocked the door. The mismatched furniture she'd mentioned to Jason looked shabby in the harsh overhead lighting. The stack of takeout containers on her counter seemed to mock her earlier confession about lonely dinners. But as she got ready for bed, Natalie caught herself smiling. Despite the uncertainty, despite the complications that Monday would bring, she couldn't regret a single moment of their time in that elevator. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and her heart leaped, hoping it might be Jason. Instead, it was her sister in Atlanta. "How was your Friday night? Anything exciting happen?" If only she knew, Natalie thought, typing back. "You could say that. Some weekends feel like a lifetime, especially when they're spent thinking about someone you shouldn't be thinking about." Saturday morning arrived with the kind of aggressive sunshine that made it impossible to stay in bed, though Natalie had been awake since 5 a.m. anyway. She'd spent the night alternating between replaying every moment in the elevator and trying to convince herself it had all been some strange fever dream brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But the faint scent of expensive cologne still lingering on her blouse, the one she'd been wearing when Jason draped his jacket around her, proved otherwise. By noon, she'd reorganized her entire apartment, done 3 loads of laundry, and called her sister back. "You sound weird," Brooklyn observed without preamble. Natalie's younger sister had inherited their grandmother's gift for reading people, even over the phone. "I don't sound weird. I sound normal." "Natalie, you called me at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to ask about my opinion on professional ethics. That's not normal for anyone, especially not for someone who usually sleeps until 10 on weekends." Natalie curled up on her small couch, her coffee mug warming her hands. Through her apartment window, she could see families in the building across the street starting their weekend routines. Couples making breakfast together, children playing in pajamas, normal people living normal lives. "Hypothetically," Natalie said, "if someone had feelings for their boss—" "Oh no!" Brooklyn's voice was immediately alert. "Natalie Grace Dormer, tell me you did not fall for your boss." "It's hypothetical." "Nothing is ever hypothetical with you. You're the most practical person I know. You don't do hypothetical romantic scenarios unless they're actively happening to you." Natalie sighed. Her sister knew her too well. "It's complicated. It always is. Tell me about him." "He's not what I expected. We got stuck in an elevator Friday night, and I got to see a different side of him. He's thoughtful and passionate about the work, and he actually listens when people talk. He knows the names of the custodial staff, Brooklyn. He told me stories about his parents and why he got into construction, and when he looks at me—" "When he looks at you, what?" "It feels like he's seeing me, really seeing me, not just the employee or the junior architect, but me." Brooklyn was quiet for a moment. "And you like him?" "I more than like him," Natalie admitted quietly, "which is terrifying and stupid, and probably going to ruin my career. Or maybe it won't. Maybe he feels the same way. Even if he does, what then? He's the CEO, Brooklyn. I'm nobody. There are policies and power dynamics and—" "You are not nobody," Brooklyn interrupted fiercely. "You're brilliant and talented, and any man would be lucky to have you notice him, CEO or otherwise." Natalie smiled despite her anxiety. "You're biased. I'm accurate, so what happens next?" "Monday morning meeting about a new project. He wants me to lead the design team." "He's promoting you?" "Apparently he's been planning to for a while. He read my original Morrison proposal, the one corporate shot down, and he wants to implement those ideas on a housing project in Brooklyn." "Natalie, that's amazing. That's what you've been working toward for years." "I know, which is why I can't mess this up by having feelings for him." Brooklyn sighed. "Honey, feelings aren't something you can turn on and off like a faucet. They just are." Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse apartment, Jason was having his own weekend crisis. He'd spent Saturday morning in his home gym, trying to exhaust himself enough to stop thinking about amber lighting and the way Natalie's laugh had filled the small elevator space. By afternoon, he'd given up and called his lawyer. Hypothetically, Jason said, pacing his living room, while his attorney Cameron listened with barely concealed amusement, what are the company policies regarding relationships between executives and employees? Hypothetically, you're about to get yourself into trouble, Cameron replied. But to answer your question, Madden Construction has a standard disclosure policy. Relationships between supervisors and direct reports must be disclosed to HR, and typically one party needs to transfer to a different department to avoid conflicts of interest. And if the executive wanted to pursue a relationship anyway, then the executive would need to be very careful about how he handled the professional side of things. No preferential treatment, no mixing personal and professional decisions, complete transparency with HR and the board. Jason stopped pacing. It's that complicated? Jason, you're the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Everything is that complicated, but Cameron paused. Is this about someone specific? Maybe. Someone worth the complications? Jason thought about the way Natalie had shared her granola bar without hesitation, how she'd talked about designing homes for other people's dreams while living modestly herself, the passion in her voice when she discussed architecture's impact on people's lives. Yes, he said quietly, definitely worth the complications. Sunday evening, Natalie stood in front of her closet trying to decide what to wear to the Monday morning meeting. Everything felt wrong, too casual, too formal, too obvious that she was trying to impress someone. She finally settled on a navy dress with a structured blazer, professional but feminine. As she hung up the outfit, her phone rang. Natalie? An unfamiliar voice. Yes, this is Diane from Building Security at Madden Construction. I have a package here for you. Normally we don't accept weekend deliveries for employees, but it's marked urgent. A package? I wasn't expecting anything. Would you like me to describe it? 20 minutes later, Natalie sat on her couch, staring at an elegant white box tied with silver ribbon. No card, no return address, just her name written in elegant handwriting on a small tag. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a beautiful silk scarf in shades of amber and gold. The fabric was impossibly soft, luxurious in a way that made her breath catch. At the bottom of the box, she found a small note written on heavy cream cardstock for Monday morning meetings and beyond. Thank you for sharing your Friday night. J. Natalie held the scarf up to the light, watching the colors shift and shimmer. It was the same amber color as the emergency lighting in the elevator, she realized. A reminder of their time suspended between floors, between their old lives and whatever was coming next. She thought about calling him to thank him, but that felt too bold, too presumptuous. Instead, she carefully folded the scarf and placed it in her purse. She would wear it tomorrow. Monday morning arrived grey and drizzly, the kind of weather that made everyone on the subway look tired before the week had even begun. Natalie arrived at the office 15 minutes early, the silk scarf adding a touch of elegance to her navy dress. She'd expected to feel nervous, but instead, she felt something like anticipation. Whatever happened in that conference room, whatever complications lay ahead, she was ready to face them. At 8:55 a.m., she knocked on the door to conference room A. "Come in," Jason's voice called from inside. Natalie opened the door and stepped into her future. Jason was standing at the head of the conference table, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. But when he saw her, when he saw the scarf, his carefully composed expression shifted into something that looked dangerously close to happiness. Professional meetings had never felt this personal before. "Good morning, Natalie," Jason said, and the way he said her name, careful, weighted with meaning, told her that he was remembering every moment of Friday night, too. "Good morning, Mr. Madden." She touched the silk scarf at her throat almost unconsciously. "Thank you for this, it's beautiful. It suits you." His eyes lingered on the amber fabric for a moment before he gestured to the conference table. "Please, sit." The room was empty, except for the two of them, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the Monday morning bustle of Manhattan below. Natalie chose a seat halfway down the long table, not too close but not too far, trying to find the balance between professional distance and the intimacy they'd shared in that elevator. Jason moved to the chair across from her instead of staying at the head of the table, a small gesture that somehow made the vast conference room feel more manageable. "I thought we should talk privately before bringing in the team," he said, opening a thick folder. "The Brooklyn project is more complex than I initially mentioned." "Complex how?" Jason slid a set of architectural plans across the table, The site is in Crown Heights, 12 acres that have been sitting vacant for 8 years. The city wants to build affordable housing for 200 families, but they also want it to be a model for sustainable urban development. Natalie studied the site plans, her architect's mind immediately beginning to visualize possibilities. The location is perfect, close to schools, public transportation, that farmer's market on Saturdays. You know the area? I grew up 20 minutes from there. My grandmother used to take me to Prospect Park every Sunday after church. Natalie traced the property lines with her finger. This lot, it was a factory once, wasn't it? Textile manufacturing. Closed in 2010 when the company moved production overseas. The soil will need remediation, but the city has already budgeted for that. What's the timeline? 18 months from approval to completion. The city council votes on our proposal in 6 weeks. Jason leaned forward. Natalie, if we get this contract, it won't just be a career-defining project for you. It could change how affordable housing is approached in this city. The weight of the opportunity settled on her shoulders. And if we don't get it, then 200 families continue waiting for homes, and another developer builds generic concrete boxes that will start falling apart in 10 years. Natalie looked up from the plans to find Jason watching her intently. Why me? I know you said you liked my Morrison proposal, but leading a project this size? Because you understand what these buildings mean to the people who will live in them, Jason said simply. Because when you talk about architecture, you talk about families and dreams and communities, not just square footage and profit margins. There must be other architects. There are other architects with more experience, if that's what you're asking. But experience without passion just builds empty spaces. Jason's voice was firm, convinced. I want someone who will fight for every detail, who will care about whether the kitchen layout helps a working mother feed her children efficiently, whether the windows let in enough light for a student to do homework at the dining table. The description was so specific, so personal, that Natalie realized he wasn't just talking about any family. You're thinking about the families your father helped after the fire. Jason's expression softened. Among others. My assistant Elena lives in subsidized housing in Queens. She commutes 90 minutes each way because that's what she can afford. Our security guard Thomas has 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment because the waiting list for family housing is 18 months long. You really do know everyone who works here. I try to. It's something my mother taught me, that a business is only as strong as the people who build it every day. They fell into comfortable silence as Natalie continued studying the plans. Jason watched her work, noting the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, how she absently touched the silk scarf when she was concentrating. In the natural light streaming through the windows, she was even more beautiful than she'd been in the amber glow of the elevator. What are you thinking? He asked finally. I'm thinking about community gardens, Natalie said, looking up with excitement sparking in her dark eyes. Look at this corner lot. It's the perfect size and gets full sun most of the day. And here, she pointed to another section, this space could be a children's playground, but designed so parents can watch from the community room windows. Keep going. The apartments themselves. What if we designed them with flexible spaces? Walls that could be moved as families grow or change. And the rooftop. Solar panels, yes, but also shared gathering spaces. Places for neighbors to actually meet each other. Jason felt that familiar tightening in his chest as he listened to her ideas. This was exactly what he'd hoped for, exactly why he'd known she was the right person for this project. There's something else, he said, pulling out another folder. The city is offering a sustainability bonus. If we exceed their green building requirements by 30%, we get an additional $2 million in funding. $2 million? To be used however we see fit for the project. Better appliances, higher quality materials, expanded community spaces. Natalie stared at him. You want me to design a building that could win $2 million in bonus funding. I want you to design a building that deserves $2 million in bonus funding. The confidence in his voice was both thrilling and terrifying. Jason, what if I mess this up? You won't. His certainty was absolute. But even if you did, which you won't, failing while trying to build something meaningful is better than succeeding at building something soulless. Before Natalie could respond, there was a knock on the conference room door. Come in, Jason called. Elena Martinez, Jason's assistant, poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Madden, but the team is here for the 9:30 meeting. Send them in, Jason said, then turned back to Natalie. Ready to meet your team? Natalie straightened her shoulders and touched the amber scarf one more time. Ready. Over the next hour, Jason introduced her to 6 other professionals who would be working on the Brooklyn project: 2 senior architects, a structural engineer, an environmental consultant, a project manager, and a community liaison. Each person brought their expertise to the table, but Jason made it clear from the beginning that Natalie was the creative lead. Miss Dormer will be heading up the design phase, he announced to the group. Her vision will guide this project from concept to completion. Natalie felt the weight of 6 pairs of eyes assessing her, some skeptical, some curious. She was by far the youngest person in the room and the only one who hadn't led a major project before. "I know what some of you are thinking," she said, standing and moving to the whiteboard at the front of the room. "And you're right, I haven't done this before. But that also means I don't have preconceived notions about what's impossible." She began sketching as she talked, her ideas flowing onto the board with confident strokes. "We're not just building apartments, we're building a community. Every decision we make should ask one question: how does this make life better for the families who will live here?" By the end of the presentation, the skepticism in the room had shifted to genuine interest. Even Marcus Chen, the senior architect who'd clearly expected to lead the project himself, was nodding along with her ideas. "Questions?" Natalie asked, capping her marker. "Timeline for the first phase of design?" asked Sarah Kim, the project manager. 3 weeks for initial concepts, 2 weeks for revisions, 1 week for final presentation prep. We'll have everything ready for the city council meeting. And if they ask for changes during the presentation?" This from Marcus, his tone testing rather than challenging. "Then we adapt," Natalie said simply. "Good design is flexible design." As the meeting wound down and the team filed out, discussing next steps and assignment deadlines, Jason lingered behind. "That was impressive," he said once they were alone again. "I may have been slightly terrified," Natalie admitted. "You didn't show it. You looked like someone who was born to lead." The compliment made her cheeks warm. "I should get started on the preliminary sketches." "Natalie," Jason's voice stopped her as she gathered her notes. "Have dinner with me tonight." The request hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that had nothing to do with the Brooklyn project. "Jason, I don't think—" "Not as your boss," he said quickly. "As someone who spent Friday night getting to know the most fascinating woman he's ever met and wants to continue that conversation." Natalie looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the intimidating CEO but the man who had shared granola bars and childhood stories in an elevator, the man who had sent her a silk scarf the color of amber light and memories. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "But we need to talk about how this is going to work. Some conversations are too important for restaurants with other people listening." Jason's apartment was nothing like Natalie had imagined. She'd expected something cold and minimalist, the kind of showcase space that belonged in architectural magazines but never felt like home. Instead, she found herself in a warm, lived-in penthouse that somehow managed to be both luxurious and comfortable. "This is beautiful," she said, accepting the glass of wine he offered and moving toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Central Park. "Thank you. I designed most of it myself, actually. Before I took over the company full-time, I spent a year working with residential architects." Jason joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "It was my father's idea. Said I couldn't run a construction company without understanding every aspect of the business." "Smart man." Natalie studied the space behind them. Rich hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves filled with actual books, comfortable furniture arranged for conversation rather than display. "It feels like you somehow." "What do you mean?" "Substantial, but not showy. Impressive, but approachable." She turned to look at him. "Like the man who wears $1,000 suits but knows every custodian's name." Jason smiled. "Speaking of which, I had my chef prepare dinner, but he left before you arrived. I thought we should have privacy for this conversation." "This conversation? The one where we figure out how to navigate whatever this is between us without destroying your career or my company." Natalie appreciated his directness. "And what do you think this is?" Jason was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I think it's something that started in an elevator and has the potential to be much more if we're brave enough to see where it leads. And if we're not brave enough, then we pretend Friday night never happened. You lead the Brooklyn project brilliantly, and in a year or two you probably get recruited by one of my competitors because you're too talented to stay in a junior position forever." The honesty of his answer surprised her. "You'd let me go?" "I'd never want you to go, but I'd never hold you back either." Jason set down his wine glass. "Natalie, I need you to understand something. Whatever happens between us personally, Your career advancement in this company is based on merit. The Brooklyn project, you earned that. The promotion that's coming after you succeed on Brooklyn, you'll earn that too. And if this becomes something more, then we'll figure it out, together, with complete transparency to HR and the board if necessary. Natalie moved away from the window, needing space to think. The apartment's open layout led to a gourmet kitchen where she could see evidence of Jason's attempt at cooking: chopped vegetables, herbs, two-place settings already arranged on the breakfast bar. "You cooked?" she asked. "I tried to cook. The results were questionable. So I ordered from that Italian place you mentioned liking." Natalie blinked. "I mentioned liking an Italian place?" "In the elevator. You said you usually order from Marcello's when you're too tired to cook." He'd remembered such a small detail from their conversation, and somehow that felt more intimate than any grand romantic gesture. "Jason," she said softly, "this scares me." "Why?" "Because I've worked so hard to get where I am. I've been careful, professional, focused. I don't take risks with my career. And you think I'm a risk?" Natalie looked at him, really looked at him. In his own space, wearing dark jeans and a soft grey sweater instead of a suit, he looked younger, more approachable. But he was still Jason Madden, still the CEO, still the man who could make or break her professional future with a single decision. "I think you're the biggest risk I've ever considered taking," she admitted. Jason moved closer, but stopped just out of reach. "What if I told you that you're worth the risk to me? That I've spent the last 3 years building walls around myself, and somehow you managed to walk right through them in the span of a few hours? I'd say that sounds like something someone might regret in the morning." "I've been thinking about you since Friday night, Natalie. Not just thinking, obsessing. I've replayed every conversation, every moment when you smiled, the way you looked when you talked about your grandmother. I've been distracted in meetings, short with my stuff, completely useless as a CEO because half my brain is stuck in that elevator with you." His confession hung between them, raw and honest. "So what are you suggesting?" Natalie asked. "I'm suggesting we try. Carefully, properly, with all the right protocols in place. But I'm also suggesting that we don't let fear of complications keep us from something that could be extraordinary." Natalie set down her wineglass and moved to the kitchen island, where Jason had laid out their dinner. The familiar containers from Marcello's made her smile despite her nerves. "You really did remember everything," she said. "I remember that you order the penne arrabbiata, but ask for extra vegetables. I remember that you said their bread reminds you of something your grandmother used to make. I remember that you always tip the delivery drivers in cash, because you know they work hard for very little money." Each detail he recited felt like a small revelation, that someone had been paying such close attention to her, that her random comments had mattered enough to be remembered. "What else do you remember?" she asked, curious now. Jason moved to stand across the island from her. "I remember that you have a small scar on your left hand from when you were 7, and tried to help your grandmother cut vegetables for Sunday dinner. I remember that you bite your lower lip when you're concentrating, and that you unconsciously tuck your hair behind your ear when you're nervous. I'm doing that right now, aren't I?" Natalie's hand had indeed moved to her hair. "You are." Jason's smile was gentle. "I also remember that you're brilliant and kind and passionate about your work in a way that makes everyone around you want to be better at theirs." "Jason, I know it's complicated. I know there are rules and policies and potential problems we haven't even thought of yet. But I also know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in, maybe ever." Natalie felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to crumble. "What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it ends badly? Then we'll handle it like adults, professionally and with respect for each other." Jason paused. "But what if it does work? What if we're throwing away something amazing because we're too scared to try?" The question hung in the air as they served dinner and moved to his dining room table. The food was delicious, the wine was perfect, and the conversation flowed as naturally as it had in the elevator. They talked about books and travel, about family traditions and childhood fears, about dreams they'd had as children, and dreams they still carried as adults. "Can I ask you something?" Natalie said, as they finished eating. "Anything. Why haven't you ever married? I mean, you're successful, attractive, charming when you want to be. You must have had opportunities." Jason was quiet for a moment, twirling his wine glass between his fingers. "I was engaged once, 3 years ago." "What happened?" "I found out she was more interested in being Mrs. Jason Madden than in being with me. She had already planned our wedding, chosen the house she wanted me to buy, picked out names for children we'd never discussed having." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Natalie caught the slight tightening around his eyes. When I confronted her about it, she said she assumed those decisions were what I wanted too. That successful men like me needed women who could manage the social expectations. I'm sorry, I'm not anymore. It taught me the difference between someone who wants to be with you and someone who wants what you represent. And which am I? Jason reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You're someone who shared a granola bar with a stranger, who talked about your grandmother's dreams instead of your own ambitions, who worried about whether I was comfortable sitting on an elevator floor. You're someone who sees me, not just what I own. The touch of his hand on hers sent warmth shooting up her arm. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, Jason agreed. Are you willing to be crazy with me? Natalie looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. In the soft lighting of his dining room, with the city sparkling beyond the windows, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Yes, she said simply, but we do this right. Slow, careful, honest about every step. Agreed. And the Brooklyn project comes first. No mixing business with personal until after the city council presentation. Absolutely. And if it doesn't work out between us? Jason lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. It's going to work out. The certainty in his voice should have scared her, but instead it felt like a promise. And for the first time in years, Natalie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved something extraordinary. The space between professional and personal had never felt so dangerously narrow. 3 weeks later, Natalie stood in Conference Room A, surrounded by architectural drawings, fabric samples, and scale models that represented hundreds of hours of work. The Brooklyn project had consumed her days and invaded her dreams, but in the best possible way. Every detail felt purposeful, every decision thoughtful. The community garden will be here, she explained to the assembled team, pointing to a detailed model of the development. Raised beds that are accessible for elderly residents, with covered seating areas where parents can watch their children play in the adjacent playground. Marcus Chen, who had become one of her strongest supporters over the past weeks, nodded approvingly. The city council is going to love the integration between indoor and outdoor spaces. It's exactly what they asked for in terms of community building. Speaking of which, Sarah Kim, the project manager, consulted her tablet. We have final approval numbers from the environmental consultant. We're exceeding the sustainability requirements by 37%. Which means, asked David Torres, the structural engineer. Which means, Jason's voice came from the doorway, we qualify for the full $2 million sustainability bonus. Everyone turned as he entered the room, and Natalie felt that familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past 3 weeks, they had maintained perfect professional boundaries during work hours. No lingering looks, no casual touches, no private conversations that couldn't be overheard by others. But the awareness between them hummed constantly beneath the surface. Mr. Madden, Natalie said formally, would you like to review the final presentation materials? I would. Jason took a seat at the conference table, his expression neutral and businesslike. The city council meeting is in 4 days. Walk me through it. For the next hour, Natalie presented every aspect of the project with the confidence of someone who knew her work was exceptional. The sustainable design elements, the community-focused layout, the innovative use of space that would make 200 families feel like they were living in homes rather than housing units. Jason asked pointed questions, suggested minor adjustments, and pushed for clarification on budget items. Exactly what any CEO would do with a project of this magnitude. But Natalie caught the moments when his professional mask slipped slightly, the way his eyes lingered on her when she explained the Children's Learning Center, the subtle smile when she described the rooftop gathering spaces. Questions from the team? Jason asked when Natalie finished. Timeline for construction start if we get approval. This from Marcus. Groundbreaking in 8 weeks. Move in for the first families in 14 months, Sarah replied promptly. Contingency plans if the council asks for modifications? David wanted to know. We've prepared 3 alternative layouts and 2 different budgeting scenarios, Natalie said. We can adapt to almost any reasonable request. As the meeting wrapped up and the team filed out, Jason lingered behind, something he'd done after every project meeting for the past 3 weeks. Impressive work, he said once they were alone. Thank you. Natalie began gathering her materials, hyper-aware of his presence. I think we have a strong proposal. Strong doesn't begin to cover it. This is the kind of project that changes how people think about affordable housing. Jason moved closer, but stopped just outside what anyone observing might consider personal space. How are you feeling about Thursday? Nervous, excited, terrified, Natalie looked up from her papers. What if they hate it? They won't hate it. But even if they did, you've created something extraordinary here. This project will get built somewhere by someone, because the work is too good to ignore. The confidence in his voice steadied her nerves. You really believe that? I really believe that. I also believe... Jason paused, glancing toward the door to make sure they were truly alone. I believe I've watched you become the architect I always knew you could be, and it's been one of the most remarkable things I've ever witnessed. The compliment, delivered in his low, warm voice, made Natalie's cheeks flush. Jason, I know, professional boundaries, but Thursday, after the presentation, after the project is officially in the city's hands. After Thursday what? After Thursday, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner at a restaurant where we don't have to worry about who might see us or what they might think. Natalie felt her heart speed up. Like a date? Exactly like a date. Before she could respond, there was a knock on the conference room door. Elena Martinez poked her head in. Mr. Madden, your 3 o'clock is here. Send them to my office. I'll be right there. Jason turned back to Natalie as Elena left. Think about it? I will. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made everything feel possible. Natalie dressed carefully in a tailored black suit with the amber silk scarf, her talisman from that first night, and arrived at City Hall an hour before the scheduled presentation. The council chamber was more intimidating than she'd expected. High ceilings, formal wooden panels, and a horseshoe-shaped desk where 5 council members would sit in judgment of months of work. Ready? Jason asked, appearing beside her as she set up the presentation materials. He looked impossibly confident in his navy suit, but Natalie caught the slight tension in his shoulders that told her he was just as invested in the outcome as she was. Ready, she said, and meant it. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. Natalie spoke passionately about community integration, sustainable design, and the human impact of thoughtful architecture. She fielded questions about budget, timeline, and construction methodology with the expertise of someone who had lived and breathed this project for weeks. One final question, Miss Dormer, said Councilwoman Rodriguez, the chair of the Housing Committee. This is a significant project for someone relatively early in their career. What makes you confident that you can deliver on these ambitious promises? Natalie thought about her grandmother, about families like the ones Jason's father had helped after the fire, about Elena commuting 90 minutes each way to work, about children who deserve to grow up in beautiful spaces. Because these aren't just buildings to me, Councilwoman Rodriguez. They're homes, and everyone deserves a home that shelters not just their bodies, but their dreams and aspirations too. I can deliver on these promises because I understand what's at stake, not just for the city's budget, but for the 200 families who are waiting for a place to build their lives. The council members exchanged glances, whispered among themselves, and then Councilwoman Rodriguez smiled. The committee votes unanimously to approve the Madden construction proposal for the Crown Heights development project. The chamber erupted in polite applause, but Natalie barely heard it. She felt Jason's hand briefly squeeze her shoulder, a professional congratulation that somehow conveyed volumes of personal pride and affection. Congratulations, Miss Dormer. Councilwoman Rodriguez approached after the formal session ended. This is exactly the kind of vision we need more of in this city. Outside City Hall, the full team gathered on the steps for photos and congratulations. Champagne appeared from somewhere, and for 20 minutes Natalie basked in the glow of collective achievement. But as the celebration wound down and team members began to disperse, she found herself alone with Jason at the edge of the crowd. So, he said quietly, his eyes warm with pride and something deeper, how does it feel to be the architect who just won the most competitive housing contract in the city? Surreal, amazing, like I might wake up any minute. Not a dream, Jason said softly, just the beginning of everything you're going to accomplish. They stood there for a moment, the autumn breeze lifting Natalie's hair, the amber scarf catching the afternoon light. Around them, the city bustled with its usual energy, but in their small bubble everything felt suspended and perfect. That dinner you mentioned, Natalie said finally. Yes? I know a place. Nothing fancy, but they make the best pasta in Brooklyn. It's where my grandmother used to take me for special occasions. Jason's smile was brilliant. Sounds perfect. As they walked down the steps of City Hall together, not touching, but somehow connected by invisible threads of shared triumph and promise, Natalie realized that some victories were even sweeter when you had someone to share them with. Some moments demand complete honesty, even when the truth could change everything. The restaurant was exactly as Natalie had described. Nothing fancy, but warm and welcoming in the way that only family-owned places could be. Fairy lights strung along the walls cast a soft glow over red-checkered tablecloths, and the aroma of garlic and fresh basil filled the air. Miss Natalie, an elderly Italian man with flour-dusted hands, rushed over as they entered. "I haven't seen you in months." "Hi, Mr. Benedetto." Natalie's face lit up with genuine affection. "This is Jason." "Jason, this is Mr. Benedetto. He and his wife Rosa have been running this place for 30 years. Any friend of Miss Natalie's is family here," Mr. Benedetto said, clasping Jason's hand warmly. "She used to come here with her nonna every Sunday after church. Such a sweet little girl, always polite, always asking Rosa for extra bread." Jason smiled, charmed by the obvious love this man had for Natalie. "She still asks for extra bread." "Ah, you know her well then. Come, come, I have the perfect table." He led them to a corner booth near a window that looked out onto a tree-lined street. The table was small and intimate, with a single candle flickering between them. "Rosa!" Mr. Benedetto called toward the kitchen. "Miss Natalie is here." A plump woman with silver hair appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face broke into a radiant smile when she saw Natalie. "Mia cara!" Rosa hurried over and enveloped Natalie in a warm hug. "You look beautiful, and so successful. I saw the news about your big project on television this afternoon." "You saw the news?" Natalie looked surprised. "Of course. The whole neighborhood is talking about our little architect who's going to build beautiful homes for families. We're so proud of you." Jason watched the exchange with fascination. This was a side of Natalie he hadn't seen before. Relaxed, beloved, surrounded by people who had known her long before she became a successful architect. "And who is this handsome man?" Rosa asked with the directness of someone who had earned the right to ask personal questions. "This is Jason," Natalie said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Jason, this is Rosa. She taught me how to make real marinara sauce." "Pleasure to meet you, Rosa," Jason said, standing to shake her hand. Rosa studied him with the sharp eyes of someone who had spent decades reading people. "You're the one she works for, yes? The boss?" "I am. And you brought her here to this place that means something to her heart, because you understand what matters to her." It wasn't a question. Jason glanced at Natalie, who was watching the exchange with a mixture of amusement and mortification. "I'm trying to understand," Jason said honestly. Rosa nodded approvingly. "Good. Understanding is the beginning of everything important." She patted his arm. "I'll bring you the special. No menus tonight. You trust Rosa to feed you properly." As she bustled away, Mr. Benedetto lingered for a moment. "Your nonna," he said to Natalie. "She would be so proud of you today. She always said you would build something beautiful for the world." After the Benedettos left them alone, Natalie and Jason sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the day's triumph and the intimacy of the restaurant settling around them. "They're wonderful," Jason said finally. "They saved me during college," Natalie replied. "When money was tight and I was working 3 jobs, they'd always find excuses to feed me. Oh, we made too much pasta, or this sauce will go bad if someone doesn't eat it. They never made me feel like charity." "Your grandmother brought you here?" "Every Sunday after church, from the time I was 5 until I left for college. She'd order the same thing every time, chicken parmigiana and a glass of Chianti, and she'd tell me stories about the buildings she saw downtown during her cleaning jobs." Jason reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you. She had a thing for men in nice suits who treated service workers with respect." "And how do you know I treat service workers with respect?" Natalie smiled. "Because you stood up to shake Rosa's hand. Because you remembered Mr. Benedetto's name 30 seconds after being introduced. Because when we were trapped in that elevator, you never once acted like being stuck with an employee was beneath you." Jason's thumb traced across her knuckles. "Being stuck with you was the best thing that happened to me all year." The sincerity in his voice made Natalie's breath catch. "Jason, I know we agreed to wait until after the project was approved. I know this is complicated and potentially messy and probably crazy. It is all of those things. But I also know that I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them, honest and terrifying and wonderful. Natalie felt her heart skip several beats. "That's—" she started, then stopped. "That's what?" Jason's voice was gentle but intense. "Too much. Too soon. Too complicated. That's exactly how I feel about you too," Natalie whispered. Jason's face broke into a smile that transformed his entire expression. "Really? Really? And it terrifies me." "Why?" Natalie took a shaky breath. Because I've never felt this way about anyone before. Because when I'm with you, I forget to be careful and professional and all the things I've trained myself to be. Because you make me want things I never thought I could have. What kinds of things? Partnership. Real partnership with someone who understands my work and supports my dreams. Someone who brings me silk scarves that match elevator lighting and remembers every random thing I say. She paused, gathering courage. Someone who looks at me like I'm worth fighting for. Jason lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her palm. You are worth fighting for. You're worth every complication and every difficult conversation with HR and every gossip session in the office break room. And if it doesn't work out, if we try this and then we'll have tried, Jason interrupted gently. And we'll handle whatever comes after, with the same honesty and respect we're showing each other right now. Rosa appeared with steaming plates of pasta, setting them down with flourish. Amore, she said simply, looking at their joined hands, is beautiful thing, don't overthink. After she left, Jason and Natalie ate and talked and laughed, the conversation flowing as easily as it had that first night in the elevator. They talked about books and travel, about childhood fears and adult dreams, about the Brooklyn project and what it meant for both their careers. Can I ask you something? Natalie said as they shared a piece of tiramisu that Rosa had insisted was too big for one person but perfect for two. Anything. That night in your apartment, when you said you'd been thinking about me obsessively since the elevator, did you really mean that? Jason set down his fork and looked directly into her eyes. I meant every word. I've never been so distracted by another person in my life. I've caught myself staring at your office door, hoping you'll walk by. I've reread your project emails multiple times just to hear your voice in my head. I've become completely unprofessional in my thoughts about you. Unprofessional how? Natalie asked, her voice slightly breathless. Wondering what you look like when you first wake up, imagining what it would feel like to have you fall asleep in my arms, thinking about taking you away somewhere for a weekend where we could just be Jason and Natalie, not CEO and architect. Each confession made Natalie's heart race faster. And now that we're here, now that we've both admitted how we feel, Jason reached across the table and cupped her face gently in his hand. Now I want to take you home. To my place or yours, I don't care. And spend the rest of the night showing you exactly how extraordinary I think you are. The promise in his voice made Natalie's entire body flush with heat. That sounds like what you want too? Like the best idea you've ever had. Jason signaled for the check, but Mr. Benedetto waved him away. Tonight is celebration, he said firmly. For Miss Natalie's success and for, he gestured between them with a knowing smile, for new beginnings. Outside the restaurant, the autumn air was crisp and full of possibility. Jason took Natalie's hand as they walked toward his car, and for the first time in weeks, touching him felt completely natural and right. No regrets? He asked, as they stopped beside his car. No regrets, Natalie confirmed. But Jason, yeah? Tomorrow everything changes. The gossip, the complications, the HR meetings, all of it starts tomorrow. Jason pulled her closer, his hands settling on her waist. Are you ready for that? With you? Natalie looked up into his green eyes, seeing her own hope and determination reflected there. I'm ready for anything. 18 months later. The golden hour light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Crown Heights Community Center, casting warm shadows across the polished concrete floors. Natalie stood at the entrance, watching as families moved through the space she had designed, children racing toward the playground visible through the glass doors, elderly residents settling into comfortable chairs near the library corner, teenagers gathered around the gaming tables she'd insisted on including. Beautiful work, Ms. Dorma Madden, said Councilwoman Rodriguez, appearing beside her with a warm smile. Though I suppose it's Director Dorma Madden now, isn't it? Natalie touched the simple gold band on her left hand, still sometimes surprised to see it there. Just Natalie is fine, Councilwoman. The families love it here. We've had a 97% occupancy rate since opening, and the community engagement scores are the highest we've ever recorded for any housing development in the city. Pride swelled in Natalie's chest as she watched a young mother help her toddler navigate the accessible climbing structure she'd designed specifically for children with different physical abilities. Every detail in this building had been intentional, considered, crafted with love. The rooftop gardens are thriving too, Councilwoman Rodriguez continued. Mrs. Patterson from Building C, you remember her, the one with all the opinions about tile colors? She's become the unofficial coordinator for the whole program. Turns out she has quite the green thumb. Natalie laughed. Mrs. Patterson asked me 12 times about those tiles, and now she's growing prize-winning tomatoes. I love when people surprise you. Speaking of surprises, the councilwoman glanced toward the main entrance. I believe your husband is here. Natalie turned to see Jason walking through the doors, still in his work clothes, but with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He'd been in back-to-back meetings all day about the new mixed-income development in Queens, another project that had grown from their success here in Crown Heights. Sorry I'm late, he said, reaching her side and pressing a quick kiss to her temple. The zoning committee had questions about the green space requirements. Good questions or complicated questions? Good questions. They want to make sure we can replicate the community garden model from here. Jason's eyes swept the bustling community center. Hard to argue with these results. They stood together, watching the life they'd helped create unfold around them. In the past year and a half, Natalie had been promoted to Director of Community Development for Madden Construction, leading a team of 12 architects and urban planners. Jason had restructured the company's focus, committing 60% of their projects to affordable and mixed-income housing. The transition hadn't been without challenges. There had been HR meetings and board discussions, gossip and speculation, and one particularly uncomfortable conversation with a reporter who wanted to write about their office romance. But they'd navigated each hurdle together, maintaining their professional integrity while building something beautiful, both at work and at home. Mrs. Dormer, a small voice called out, and they turned to see 7-year-old Marcus Thompson running toward them, his backpack bouncing with each step. Hi, Marcus, Natalie said, crouching down to his level. How was school today? Good, look what I drew in art class. He pulled a crumpled paper from his backpack, revealing a crayon drawing of a tall building surrounded by trees and flowers. It's our building. Ms. Garcia said I'm good at drawing buildings like you. This is incredible, Natalie said, studying the drawing seriously. You even included the community garden on the roof. That's excellent attention to detail. Marcus beamed. My mom says you designed our whole apartment. She says that's why the kitchen window is perfect for watching me play in the courtyard. Your mom is very smart, Jason said, earning a shy smile from the boy. Are you going to design more buildings? Marcus asked. I am. Would you like to help me sometime? I could always use an assistant who's good at drawing. Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Ask your mom if you can come to my office next week, and I'll show you how we plan buildings before we build them. After Marcus ran off to find his mother, Jason shook his head in amazement. You're going to have that kid designing skyscrapers before he's 10, maybe. Wouldn't that be something? They walked through the development as the afternoon light began to fade, past the playground where children called goodbye to their friends, past the corner market where Mr. Singh was chatting with regular customers, past the small cafe where teenagers did homework while sharing plates of fries. Do you remember? Jason said as they reached the main courtyard. That night in the elevator when you talked about designing spaces for people's whole lives. I remember everything about that night. You said you thought about a little girl coming home from school to a building that made her feel like she mattered. Natalie followed his gaze to where 8-year-old Zara Williams was racing up the front steps of Building B, her school uniform rumpled, but her face bright with excitement as she called to her grandmother watching from their third-floor balcony. Every day, Natalie said softly. I see it every day. They reached Jason's car, but neither of them moved to get in. The development looked different in the early evening light, warmer, more alive, full of the kind of ordinary magic that happened when good design met real human needs. I have something for you, Jason said, reaching into his jacket pocket. It's not my birthday. It's better than a birthday. He pulled out a thick envelope. Open it. Inside were architectural renderings and site plans for a massive development project. Natalie's breath caught as she recognized the scope. 20 buildings, mixed-income housing for over 1,000 families, community spaces, schools, and what looked like a small medical clinic. Jason, this is enormous. It's the Riverside project. The city approved our proposal this morning. His voice was warm with pride and excitement. They want us to replicate what we did here, but on a scale that could house 3% of New York's families waiting for affordable housing. Natalie stared at the plans, her mind already racing with possibilities. 3% doesn't sound like much, but that's 3,000 families, Natalie. 3,000 families who will have beautiful, sustainable, community-centered homes because of the work you started here. She looked up at him, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. You want me to lead this? I want us to lead this, together, equal partners in the biggest affordable housing project the city has ever attempted. Equal partners, Jason smiled. The board approved my recommendation this morning. You're being promoted to senior partner and chief design officer. Your name will be on the building, Natalie. Madden and Dormer Construction. The papers fluttered in Natalie's hands as the full impact hit her. Her name on the company, her designs changing thousands of lives. Her grandmother's dreams of beautiful spaces for everyone, realized on a scale she'd never imagined possible. There's one more thing, Jason said, his voice softer now. If we take this project, it'll mean 2 years of 18-hour days, constant travel between sites, more pressure than either of us has ever faced. And I know how much your work means to you. I know this is everything you've worked toward. But I also know that I want to build a life with you that's about more than just buildings, no matter how beautiful they are. Natalie set the plans down on the hood of the car and moved closer to him. What are you saying? I'm saying I want it all with you. The late nights designing revolutionary housing projects and the quiet Sunday mornings reading the paper in bed, the city council meetings and the family dinners, the professional triumphs and the personal everyday moments that make life worth living. Jason, I'm saying that getting trapped in that elevator was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it led to this, he gestured toward the thriving community around them, but because it led to you. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. You know what I think about when I look at all this? Tell me. I think about that little girl you mentioned, the one who comes home from school to a building that makes her feel like she matters. But I also think about the woman who gets to design that building, who gets to come home every night to a man who believes in her dreams as much as she does. And I think she deserves both. Beautiful work that changes the world, and a beautiful life with someone who sees her for everything she is. Jason cupped her face in his hands. Do you want both? With you? I want everything. As the sun set behind the skyline they'd helped reshape, Jason kissed his wife in the courtyard of the first building they'd created together, surrounded by the sounds of families living, laughing, and building their own small pieces of forever in the homes she'd designed. Somewhere in Building C, Mrs. Patterson was probably watering her prize-winning tomatoes. In Building A, little Marcus Thompson was likely showing his mother the drawing he'd made of their home. And in apartments throughout the development, 200 families were sitting down to dinner in kitchens with windows perfectly positioned to let in the last golden light of day. It was exactly what Natalie had always dreamed architecture could be, not just shelter, but sanctuary, not just buildings, but foundations for the full, rich lives that happened inside them. And as they drove home through the city, they were slowly, carefully, lovingly transforming one family at a time. Natalie reflected that sometimes the very best things in life happened when you stopped trying to control every outcome and started trusting that some stories were meant to be written together. Because in the end, it wasn't the elevator that had trapped them that Friday night. It was destiny deciding that two hearts who had been building walls around themselves were finally ready to build something beautiful together. What lesson about love and ambition did this story teach you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.